Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly one-of-a-kind legal defense, and we're looking at it through the lens of a rigorous ChatGPT analysis. We are going to dive into a fascinating case study that literally sits right at the collision point of high-level academia and the strict, rigid rules of the criminal justice system.
Now, let's get into this wild premise. Can quantum physics and epistemology actually win a criminal trial? Usually, when someone's accused of a crime, you expect them to bring up alibis, right? Maybe eyewitnesses or some legal technicality. But what happens when a defendant uses Plato's cave, network science, and complex math to prove they couldn't possibly have committed the crime? Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today, an AI-generated analysis that rigorously evaluates this exact mind-bending defense.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at this highly theoretical defense. Then, we'll break down the crime into three pillars: the action of defining false information, the intent of proving what it means to know something, and the consequence of measuring public disorder. Finally, we'll pit philosophy against hard legal evidence.
All right, part one, a highly theoretical defense. Let's set the stage here with our defendant, Dr. Chen Jingyuan. He was charged with picking quarrels and provoking trouble simply for forwarding some online posts. This is a charge you usually see thrown around for rumor-mongering or spreading fake news on the internet. But instead of just a standard denial like, hey, I didn't do it, Dr. Chen did something incredible. He built this massive academic framework from prison to deconstruct the prosecution's claims, which ChatGPT then evaluated. He didn't just deny the charge, he basically put the entire concept of human cognition and complex systems on trial. So our explainer today leans on how an advanced AI model analyzed whether this incredibly deep interdisciplinary strategy actually holds up in court. Moving to part two, action, defining false information. We're kicking off our deconstruction with the very first pillar of any crime, which is the objective action. In this case, spreading false information. Because, for a crime to occur, there has to be an illegal act. The prosecution claimed Dr. Chen spread rumors. Simple enough, right? Well, not quite.
Notice how brilliantly the defense maps this out. Dr. Chen categorized all the posts he forwarded into four distinct buckets: art, emotion, opinion, and objective fact. He argued, and ChatGPT's analysis absolutely backs this up, that art, emotion, and opinions are purely subjective. They literally cannot be verified as true or false, meaning they legally cannot be classified as rumors. It's only objective descriptions of reality that can be measured on a true or false scale. So, if the prosecution just lumped all his posts together without sorting them, bam, their whole case immediately has a massive structural flaw.
Furthermore, the defense threw in a great point. Ordinary citizens absolutely do not have a universal legal duty to fact-check every single meme or article they share online. ChatGPT points out that this is a super effective defense. Why? Because it completely shifts the burden of proof right back to the prosecution. The state can't just say this information is bad. No, they have to objectively prove it was false and prove the defendant was responsible for knowing it was false.
Okay, part three, intent, proving knowing. This brings us to the second pillar, subjective intent. Did the defendant knowingly spread falsehoods? Because in criminal law, it's usually not enough to just do something wrong. You actually have to know you were doing it.
Here is where it gets wild. The defendant uses deep philosophical concepts like Plato's cave and Gödel's incompleteness theorems to argue a stance of epistemological skepticism. He's basically saying, hey, human cognition is inherently limited, making absolute truth unknowable. Therefore, I literally cannot knowingly spread a lie because I can't know the absolute truth of anything.
It is a fascinating argument, but this perfectly illustrates where the defense hits a wall. ChatGPT points out that criminal law operates on everyday, practical cognition, not cosmic philosophical certainty. The law honestly doesn't care if you solve the ultimate nature of reality. The legal standard just asks, in a normal, daily context, was it highly probable that you knew the specific post was fake? So, as cool as Dr. Chen's philosophical shield is, it kind of falls apart against the practical intent requirement.
But don't count him out yet. ChatGPT found a legally fatal blow to the prosecution's case. The prosecution basically argued that because Dr. Chen is a highly educated scholar, he just should have known the information was false. Well, ChatGPT highlights that this is a massive misstep. You cannot use someone's education level to just blindly presume criminal intent.
That violates the principle of responsibility, it treats people unequally under the law, and it illegally replaces hard evidence with an assumption based on identity. This was absolutely one of the strongest points in Dr. Chen's corner.
All right, Section 4, Consequence, Measuring Public Disorder. We're at the third pillar now. Did this action actually cause serious public disorder? For a conviction, your actions must result in actual, real-world chaos.
To fight this, the defendant brings in literal, complex physics. Dr. Chen used something called the Galton-Watson process, which is a mathematical branching model from network science. He argued that as an isolated minor node on a social network with very few followers, his posts mathematically had a propagation rate of less than 1. This means statistically his posts would just naturally die out. It's mathematically impossible for his tiny micro-actions to cause macro-level systemic chaos. To claim otherwise is a classic micro-macro fallacy.
Just look at how this builds a unified, three-layered structural defense spanning multiple disciplines. We have got philosophy denying the intent, physics denying the result, and law denying the attribution of blame. It's an incredibly cohesive strategy that tries to just completely dismantle the prosecution's narrative from the ground up.
But time for a reality check. ChatGPT clarifies that while the science is undeniably profound, courts do not accept theoretical probability as a substitute for direct evidence. A judge is not going to look at a mathematical model of network robustness to decide if a crime happened. The legal standard is super practical. Did the post get over 500 retweets? Did it actually cause panic in the streets? Theoretical physics can explain why something didn't happen, sure, but the law only cares if it did happen.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Philosophy versus Legal Evidence. This is the climax. What actually wins in a court of law? We have seen a defense leveraging the greatest minds in philosophy and advanced network science. But how does that actually translate into a winning strategy?
Well, ChatGPT's analysis reveals that translating all that high theory into the basic, grounded reality of lack of evidence is the ultimate legal shield. Despite all the beautiful math proving his posts couldn't cause chaos, the absolute strongest part of Dr. Chen's defense was the empirical fact that the posts didn't cause chaos. There were literally 0 retweets, 0 real-world disruptions. The original posts were even still up online. The consequence pillar of the crime entirely collapses, not because of quantum physics, but because of a simple lack of real-world evidence.
As this quote perfectly summarizes, intellectually profound theories are fascinating, but in the eyes of the law, empirical evidence is always king. ChatGPT's assessment is that Dr. Chen's defense is structurally brilliant. It totally dismantles the prosecution's assumptions. But its real power lies in simply pointing out that the prosecution failed to provide concrete, undeniable proof. They couldn't prove he knowingly spread false facts, and they couldn't prove he caused a disruption. And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought about the intersection of human intellect, artificial intelligence, and the rigid rules of law. We have just watched an AI effortlessly parse through epistemological skepticism and network mathematics to extract the core legal truths of a really complex case. As AI gets more integrated into legal analysis, we have got to wonder, will it empower defendants to bring increasingly complex, multidisciplinary defenses to the courtroom? Or will it just remind us that at the end of the day, the law relies on simple, observable facts? Think about that as you consider how technology is reshaping justice. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.